My girlfriend said, "I told the adoption agency, you have a criminal record. We won't get approved now, and I don't want kids anyway. We've been in the process for 8 months." I said, "That's fraud." Then I called the agency, explained her sabotage, and continued the process as a single applicant. When I got approved 6 months later, I, 35 male, am a middle school special education teacher. I've been doing this for 11 years. I work with kids who have learning disabilities, behavioral challenges, emotional disorders, the kids that a lot of the system has given up on by the time they hit my classroom. I make $56,000 a year. That is not a lot of money for someone trying to adopt a child, and I knew that going in. I knew every number, every timeline, every hoop I need to jump through. I've been researching adoption since I was 28 years old. I want to explain why. Not because I owe anyone my backstory, but because it matters for the rest of this. I grew up in foster care, entered the system at 7, bounced between 4 homes before I landed with a family that actually wanted me when I was 11. They didn't adopt me. They were older, already had grown kids, and the legal process felt overwhelming to them. But they kept me until I aged out at 18. They came to my high school graduation. They came to my college graduation. They still call me on my birthday. They're good people, but I was never legally anyone's kid. I aged out of the system carrying a garbage bag of clothes and a GED study guide and a bone-deep understanding of what it feels like to be a child that nobody chose. That's why I teach the kids I teach, and that's why I wanted to adopt. My girlfriend and I had been together for 2.5 years when we started the adoption process. She works as a paralegal at a family law firm. She makes about $58,000. She's sharp, organized, good with paperwork, which was actually helpful in the early stages of the adoption process because there is so much paperwork. When we first talked about kids, early in the relationship, she said she was open to it. I took that at face value. I told her about my adoption plans, that this was something I'd wanted for years, that it was non-negotiable for me, that I needed a partner who was genuinely on board. She said she was. She said she admired what I was doing. She said she couldn't imagine a better father. I want to believe she meant it at the time. I really do, because the alternative that she lied about wanting kids for 2.5 years is something I can't fully process even now. We started the adoption process 8 months before everything blew up. Domestic infant adoption through a licensed private agency. I was the primary applicant with her listed as my partner and co-parent. We did the home study together. We did the interviews together. We completed the training hours together, about 30 hours total of parenting education, attachment theory, trauma-informed care. We filled out the financial disclosures, the health assessments, the personal references. I gave my fingerprints for the background check. She gave hers. The process is slow. The agency told us up front. Once approved, the wait for a match could be anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. But the approval process itself takes about 4 to 6 months. We were right on track. Then, 8 months in, 3 weeks before our approval decision was expected, she told me what she'd done. It was a Tuesday evening. She'd been distant for a couple of weeks, quieter than usual, spending more time on her phone, less interested in talking about the adoption stuff. I noticed, but attributed it to stress. The process, stressful. I wasn't going to push. She sat down across from me at the kitchen table. I was grading papers and said, "I need to tell you something and you're going to be upset." I put my pen down. I said, "Okay. I called the agency last week. I told them you have a criminal record." I stared at her. "I don't have a criminal record." "I know. Then why would you tell them that?" "Because I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want kids. I've never really wanted kids. I thought I could get on board with it for you, but I can't, and the longer this process went on, the more trapped I felt. So I called them and told them there was information you'd withheld." I couldn't speak for about 30 seconds. She kept talking. "I told them you had a misdemeanor assault charge from college that you didn't disclose on the application. I figured that would be enough to flag the file and stall things. That's fraud. You lied to a licensed agency to sabotage a legal process. It's not fraud, it's a phone call. I needed it to stop. I needed the pressure to stop. You were so focused on this and I couldn't breathe. You could have told me you didn't want kids. You would have left me. So instead you committed fraud against an adoption agency. Stop calling it fraud. I made a phone call. I looked at this woman I'd shared 2.5 years with. This woman who'd sat through 30 hours of training about how to care for traumatized children. Who'd held my hand during the home study when the social worker asked about my own foster care experience. Who'd watched me tear up describing what it felt like to be an unchosen kid and had said, "You're going to be an amazing dad." And she called the agency and lied to make sure it never happened. I said, "That's fraud, and I'm going to fix it." She said, "What does that mean?" I said, "It means I'm calling the agency in the morning." She said, "If you call them, we're done." I said, "We're already done." She slept in the guest room. I didn't sleep at all. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold 3 times, looking at the adoption binder we'd assembled together. 8 months of documents, reference letters, training certificates, our profile book with photos we'd carefully chosen. 8 months of my life organized in a 3-ring binder with color-coded tabs. At 8 a.m., I called the agency. Update 1, 3 weeks later. The phone call with the agency was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. And I've had conversations with 12-year-olds who've been removed from their homes, so that's saying something. I asked to speak with our assigned caseworker. I told her that my partner had contacted the agency and made a false claim about my background. I told her what the claim was: a fabricated misdemeanor assault charge. I told her it was untrue and that I had a clean record, which they already knew because they'd run my background check months ago and it came back clear. The caseworker was professional but cautious. She confirmed that they had received a call. She wouldn't tell me exactly what was said, but she confirmed that concerning information had been communicated. She said the file had been flagged for review. I asked her what I needed to do to clear it. She said the background check was already on file and clean. But because the allegation had been made by someone listed on the application as a co-parent, they needed to investigate. She said it could delay the approval by several weeks while they reviewed. Then I told her the other part. I told her my girlfriend and I were no longer together. I told her I wanted to continue the adoption process as a single applicant. She paused. She said, "You understand that changing from a couple application to a single applicant essentially restarts portions of the process. You need a new home study, new financial assessment as a single income household. The profile will need to be updated." I said, "I understand. And you understand that single male applicants face additional scrutiny and longer wait times?" "I understand. Are you sure you want to proceed?" "Ma'am, I grew up in the system. I aged out carrying my belongings in a trash bag. I have wanted to give a child a home since I was 18 years old. Yes, I want to proceed." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said she'd send me the updated paperwork and that we'd schedule a new home study. She also said, and this was important, that the false allegation from my ex would be documented in the file and that the agency took such actions very seriously because false claims can cause real damage to applicants and to the integrity of the process. I asked what very seriously meant. She said the agency would likely file a formal complaint with the state licensing board, since making false statements to a licensed adoption agency can constitute fraud or interference with child placement proceedings. In some states, it's a misdemeanor. I hung up and sat in my car in the school parking lot for about 10 minutes. Then I went inside and taught 4 periods of 7th grade special ed like it was a normal Tuesday. It was not a normal Tuesday. My ex moved out of my apartment over the next few days. She'd been staying at her parents' house since the night I told her we were done. Her mom came with an SUV and they packed her stuff while I was at work. She left her key on the counter. She also left a note that said, "You're choosing a hypothetical child over a real relationship. I hope it's worth it." Hypothetical child. A child that doesn't exist yet is hypothetical. A child sitting in foster care right now, waiting for someone to choose them, is hypothetical. I put the note in the recycling bin and I washed the counter. Now, the entitlement escalation. About a week after she moved out, I got a call from her mom. Her mom is a retired dental hygienist with strong opinions and a voice that could cut glass. She opened with, "I think you need to reconsider what you're doing." "Which part?" "All of it. The adoption, the breakup, everything. My daughter made a mistake. She committed fraud against a licensed adoption agency. She made a phone call because she was overwhelmed and scared. She didn't file a false police report. She didn't forge documents. She picked up a phone and said something she shouldn't have. She told them I had a criminal record. I don't. That's a lie to a licensed agency during a legal process. You're blowing this out of proportion. She panicked. Women panic when they feel trapped. She wasn't trapped. She could have told me she didn't want kids at any point in the last 2.5 years. Her mom pivoted. In this adoption as a single man, do you know how that looks? Do you know what people will think? I don't care what people think. I care about giving a kid a home. A child needs a mother. A child needs someone who shows up. I'll be that person. Her mom called me naive and stubborn and hung up. I went back to grading papers. But it wasn't over, because 3 days after her mom's call, something happened that I absolutely did not anticipate. I got an email from the agency. My ex had called them again. This time, she hadn't made a false allegation about me. Instead, she called to express concerns about my emotional stability following the breakup. She told them I was going through a mental health crisis and that she was worried about a child being placed with someone in that state. She was trying to sink my application a second time. I forwarded the email to my caseworker immediately. I also called a lawyer, a family law attorney I found through a coworker's recommendation. $250 consultation fee. I explained the situation. He said 2 things that mattered. First, the repeated false and misleading statements to a licensed agency could potentially support a restraining order or a cease and desist, depending on specifics. He recommended starting with a cease and desist letter, which he could draft for $400. Second, he said the agency itself might take action against her independently, especially with 2 documented instances of interference. He said agencies protect their process aggressively because their licensure depends on the integrity of their evaluations. I authorized the cease and desist. It was sent to my ex within 5 business days. The letter stated that any further contact with the adoption agency regarding my application would be considered harassment and interference with a legal process, and that further action, including a restraining order and potential civil litigation, would follow. That cost me $650 total, on a $56,000 salary. For a letter telling my ex-girlfriend to stop lying about me to the people deciding whether I get to be a father. I want you to sit with that for a second. $650 because someone who said she loved me decided that if she couldn't have me, she'd make sure no child could either. Update 2, 6 months later. I debated writing this update for a while. Not because the story isn't worth finishing. It is, but because the ending is heavy in a different way than the rest of it. It's not dramatic. There's no courtroom scene, no confrontation, no satisfying explosion. It's just life moving forward in the way life does when you refuse to stop pushing. After the cease and desist was sent, my ex stopped contacting the agency. Whether that was because of the letter or because her lawyer, the family law firm she works at, told her to knock it off, I don't know. The result was the same: silence. Finally, the agency moved forward with my application as a single male applicant. New home study, this time just me in my 2-bedroom apartment. The social worker came, evaluated the space, asked about my support system, asked about the breakup. I was honest about everything. I told her what my ex did. She already had it in the file. She asked me a question I'll never forget. What makes you think you can do this alone? I said, I was raised alone, not because nobody tried, but because the system is imperfect and some kids fall through. I fell through. I landed okay, but I know what falling feels like, and I know that one consistent person could have changed everything. I want to be that person. I don't need a partner for that. I just need to show up. She wrote something in her notebook, nodded, moved on. The new financial assessment was tough. Single income, $56,000, 2-bedroom apartment. Not ideal on paper, but I've been saving specifically for this. I had $18,000 in a dedicated adoption fund I'd been building for 3 years. My monthly budget was tight, but workable. I showed them the spreadsheet. They appreciated the spreadsheet. Turns out adoption caseworkers love a good spreadsheet. The process took about 4 more months after the restart. Background check, reconfirmed clean. References resubmitted. My foster parents, my principal, 2 colleagues, my best friend from college. The training hours from the couple's application carried over, thankfully. I got the approval call on a Thursday afternoon in March. I was in my classroom, after school, helping a kid with his reading comprehension homework. My phone buzzed. I saw the agency's number. I told the kid, "Give me 1 minute," and stepped into the hallway. The caseworker said, "Congratulations. Your application has been approved. You're officially in the waiting pool." I leaned against the hallway wall. A seventh grader walked past and said, "Mister, you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, buddy, I'm great." And my voice cracked, and the kid looked at me like I was insane and kept walking. Seventh graders have zero patience for adult emotions, which is honestly refreshing. I went back in the classroom. The kid with the reading homework looked up and said, "Can we finish this?" "I gotta go." I sat down and helped him finish. We worked on main idea versus supporting details. He got 3 out of 4 right. Normal Thursday. Now let me tell you what happened with my ex during those 6 months, because this is the part the story needs. The cease and desist did its job. She stopped contacting the agency. But about 2 months after the letter, the agency filed its own complaint. Remember how the caseworker said they take false statements very seriously? They weren't kidding. The agency reported my ex's actions, both the fabricated criminal record claim and the emotional stability call, to the state's adoption licensing board. The licensing board investigated. I know this because my lawyer received a notification as a courtesy since I was the affected applicant. The investigation confirmed that false statements have been made to a licensed agency during an active adoption proceeding. The board issued a formal finding against my ex. Here's what that means practically. Her name is now flagged in the state's adoption and foster care system. If she ever applies to adopt, foster, or serve as a court-appointed advocate for children in this state, that finding will appear. It doesn't prevent her from doing those things, but it triggers an automatic review. It's a permanent footnote on her record within that system. Additionally, and this is the part that actually had consequences she could feel, the licensing board forwarded their finding to the state bar's paralegal certification body. My ex is a certified paralegal. Her certification requires adherence to ethical standards, and making false statements in a legal proceeding, even a quasi-legal one like an adoption application, is an ethical violation. Her certification board opened a review. I don't know the outcome of that review as of right now. It's still pending. But my lawyer said the range of outcomes goes from a formal reprimand, which would be on her professional record, to suspension of her paralegal certification. If she lost her certification, she could still work in a law office. Certification isn't legally required in most states, but most family law firms require it, and the firm she works for almost certainly does. She might lose her job. Not because I went after her job. I didn't. I never contacted her employer. I never filed a complaint with the bar. The agency filed the complaint. The licensing board forwarded it. The dominoes fell because she knocked over the first one, and every institution between her and me did exactly what institutions are supposed to do when someone lies during a process designed to protect children. Her mom called me one more time about a month ago. Different tone than before. No lecture, no guilt trip. She said, "Did you know about the certification review?" I said, "I found out after it was filed. Can you stop it?" I didn't start it. The agency filed the complaint. I have no control over what the licensing board does. She could lose her career. She could have told me she didn't want kids. Silence. Then her mom said, very quietly, she should have. That's the closest anyone in her family came to acknowledging what she did. Her mom didn't apologize. She didn't say her daughter was wrong. She just said she should have. And then she hung up. And that was the last time anyone from that family contacted me. My ex, from what I know through the one mutual friend still loosely connected to both our lives, is still working at the firm. The certification review is still pending. She told people I weaponized the adoption system against her. She told people I reported her to the state when I didn't, the agency did. The story she tells, apparently, is that she expressed honest concerns and was punished for speaking up. She does not, in any version of her story, mention that she fabricated a criminal record. That part just doesn't exist in her narrative. Convenient how that works. I'm in the waiting pool now. My profile is active. Somewhere in this country, there might be a birth mother or a child looking at my profile book, the one I rebuilt from scratch as a single applicant, with photos of my classroom, my apartment, my foster parents who drove 2 hours for the new home study just to tell the caseworker what kind of person I am. The wait could be months. It could be over a year. Single male applicants wait longer. I know the statistics. I know the reality. I know that some birth mothers will skip my profile entirely because there's no partner in the photos. I made peace with that, but I'm in the pool. I'm approved. My background check is clean because it's always been clean. My file has a note in it documenting what my ex did, and that note protects me. It shows that someone tried to interfere and failed, which means the agency has evaluated the interference and cleared me anyway. I have a room in my apartment that's empty. 2-bedroom, remember? The second bedroom has been empty since she moved out. I haven't furnished it yet because I don't know what age the child will be. Could be an infant. Could be a 5-year-old. Could be an 8-year-old who likes dinosaurs or a 3-year-old who likes trucks. I don't know yet. So the room stays empty and ready. Every morning, I walk past that open door on my way to the kitchen. Every morning, I look at the empty room and I think about the kid I was at 7, sitting in a social worker's car with a garbage bag, going somewhere new again. And I think, whoever you are, wherever you are, I'm coming. The paperwork's done. The room's ready. I just need you to find me. My ex tried to make sure that room stayed empty. She lied to the people responsible for filling it. And now she's sitting in a certification review because the system worked exactly the way it's supposed to, slowly, bureaucratically, imperfectly, but correctly. That's it. That's the whole story. I'm a $56,000 a year special ed teacher with a clean record and an empty bedroom and more patience than any human should reasonably have. And I'm going to be somebody's dad. Not because I'm special, because I refuse to stop.